the summer of 1942, when the first American M4 Sherman tanks rolled off the assembly lines in Detroit, German officers in North Africa couldn't help but laugh. Through their field glasses, they watched these new American machines lumber across the desert, and what they saw didn't impress them one bit. The armor looked thin, the guns seemed small, and compared to their own fearsome Tigers and Panthers, these American tanks appeared almost comical. German tank commanders started calling them toy tanks, sharing jokes in their mess halls about how the Americans had sent children's playthings to fight a man's war. They had every reason for confidence back then. Their Tiger tanks could punch through a Sherman's armor from over 2 miles away, while the Sherman's 75mm gun barely scratched German steel at close range. But what those German officers couldn't see from their distant observation posts was something far more significant than the thickness of armor plating or the size of a gun barrel. What they missed was the sound that would soon define their worst nightmares, the thunderous rumble of not one Sherman, not 10 Shermans, but hundreds upon hundreds of these so-called toy tanks moving as one unstoppable force across the battlefield. The Americans weren't building tanks to win individual duels like medieval knights. They were building an army that could move mountains, literally and figuratively, through sheer force of numbers and an industrial capacity that boggled the mind. The mockery began to fade when reports started filtering back from the front lines about just how many of these Shermans were appearing on battlefields across North Africa and Sicily. German intelligence officers pored over captured documents, trying to make sense of the numbers they were seeing. It seemed impossible that any nation could produce tanks in such quantities. Yet month after month, more Shermans appeared. By 1943, American factories were turning out nearly 1,500 tanks every single month, numbers that dwarfed anything Germany had ever attempted. What the Germans discovered, to their growing horror, was that America had turned tank production into something resembling an assembly line for automobiles. While German craftsmen were still hand-fitting armor plates and carefully calibrating each gun, American workers were mass-producing tanks with interchangeable parts, standardized components, and assembly techniques that prioritized speed and volume over individual perfection. A German Panzer might be superior to any single Sherman in head-to-head combat, but that superiority meant nothing when 5 Shermans appeared for every German tank on the battlefield. The first time German tank crews heard the true sound of American armor wasn't the whine of a single engine or the clatter of one set of tracks. It was the earth-shaking roar of entire armored divisions moving in coordination, a sound like thunder that rolled across the landscape for miles. Tank crews who survived those encounters described a noise that seemed to come from everywhere. At once, the mechanical symphony of hundreds of engines working in perfect harmony, punctuated by the rhythmic grinding of steel treads against stone and earth. As the war progressed and American forces landed in France, German defensive positions that had been designed to stop individual tank attacks found themselves overwhelmed by waves of Shermans that just kept coming. A German anti-tank gun crew might successfully destroy 3 or 4 attacking tanks, only to watch in despair as 10 more appeared behind them, then 20 more behind those. The Americans had solved the problem of tank warfare not through superior engineering or better armor, but through the simple mathematics of overwhelming force. German tank ace Heinrich Hoffmann, who had destroyed over 60 Allied tanks during the war, wrote in his journal about the changing nature of combat in 1944. He described the growing sense of hopelessness that crept into German armored units as they realized they were fighting not just American tanks, but American industrial might itself. Every Sherman they destroyed was replaced within days. Every German tank they lost represented months of precious resources and skilled labor that could never be recovered. The genius of American tank strategy became clear during the breakout from Normandy, when General Patton's Third Army unleashed its full armoured might across the French countryside. German defenders, still thinking in terms of traditional tank versus tank combat, found their carefully prepared positions simply bypassed and overwhelmed. Shermans moved in such numbers that they could afford to take different routes, surround strong points, and maintain constant pressure on multiple fronts simultaneously. The sound that had once been dismissed as the noise of toy tanks became the death knell of German resistance in Western Europe. By the time German commanders fully understood what they were facing, it was far too late to adapt their tactics or match American production. The laughter had long since died in those German mess halls, replaced by the grim recognition that America had weaponized its greatest strength, not just its courage or determination, but its ability to turn entire industries toward the business of war. When the war ended in May 1945, American factories had produced over 49,000 Sherman tanks, a number that represented more armored vehicles than Germany had built during the entire war. Those toy tanks had rumbled through North Africa, Sicily, Italy, France, and deep into the heart of Germany itself. The final irony was that many of the German officers who had once mocked the Sherman found themselves riding in captured American vehicles during their journey to prisoner-of-war camps, listening one last time to the steady, reliable sound of American engineering that had helped bring the war to its inevitable conclusion. The Germans had been right about one thing. Individually, their tanks were often superior to the Sherman, but they had failed to understand the most important lesson of industrial warfare. In the end, quantity has a quality all its own, and the sound of American determination, multiplied by thousands, was more powerful than all the German engineering excellence in the world.